Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing 10 really popular books that I have DNF'd. But before we go ahead and get on into the list of books, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. I post new videos every Sunday and every Wednesday, and sometimes I post bonus videos on Fridays. So, a little disclaimer before we get on into this. If you absolutely love these books, then I am so happy for you. You have no idea how much it warms my heart to know that a book that I did not like, you absolutely loved, because that just means that you connected with something that the author was able to communicate, whereas I was not. And I feel like I'm confident in saying that all of these books, even though I DNF'd them, I do not plan on giving a second shot, but there is one exception to the rule, and I'm going to start with that book. So the first popular book that I DNF'd was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. So I actually read this book, oh my gosh, it's probably been over 10 years. And it's a funny story how I got this book, because the gym that I used to go to, and this is like a while ago, there was this guy that was always there on the stationary bike reading novels, and then we like just started chatting, and he let me borrow The Name of the Wind, and I ended up DNFing it around 50% mark because I was just so bored. And this book is just so famous, and I feel like I am a completely different reader than I was 10 years ago, especially with regards to fantasy. So this is a book that I fully intend on trying again, most likely in 2021. And I am so dedicated to reading this book that I also bought the sequel, Wise Man's Fear. So The Name of the Wind is a book that I feel like I will love now that I am a more seasoned fantasy reader, and I fully intend to give my best effort in 2021. So the rest of these books are in no particular order. The next one I'm going to be talking about is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is an adult, like, paranormal, dark academia, and I tried reading it last October, which I think is about the time it came out, and I DNF'd this about 65% of the way through, so I actually read a decent amount of it. The reason that I didn't like this book is that I just couldn't connect with our main character, Alex. I couldn't connect with her as a character, her backstory, where she came from, and there were just certain things about the book that I just didn't understand why Leigh Bardugo did those things. I'm not sure if she was trying to like add in shock value, but there was a scene where Alex, as a young child, almost gets raped by like a ghost, and I don't know if I read that wrong, but like it just didn't make much sense to me. And then there was a scene where someone takes revenge on someone by making them eat feces, and I was just like, why are you adding in all these things? Is it for shock value? And I just really couldn't connect with the things that she chose to do and the story in general. There were things about Ninth House that I did like, and I actually ended up rating it 2 stars because of those things, but overall I couldn't finish it. The next popular book is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I started reading this last November around Thanksgiving, and I actually read about 75% of this book. So I got a huge way through this book, and I really did not care about the story or the characters, and it took me forever to pick up this book because I tried reading Unwind by him and also DNF'd that. So I've come to the conclusion that Neal Shusterman is just not an author that I personally mesh with, even though I absolutely love his concepts. So Scythe is a world where everybody basically can live forever, and sickness and death have been conquered, and people known as scythes are given the authority to go around reaping or killing people. So that is just such a profound and deep concept. Unwind was the same thing, a very profound and deep concept. But I just found that I do not connect with his writing style at all. I feel extremely detached from the characters, from the plot, from the world, and in both books, neither one really gripped me in any way that made me want to keep reading. So I wish that I was someone that loved Neal Shusterman. Unfortunately, he's just not for me. The next book I'm going to be talking about is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is an adult, like, post-apocalyptic story, and this book is just ranted and raved about. It is so popular, and I picked it up, and I got to chapter 13, I think, before I just decided to DNF. But this is a world where a disease or plague has swept across the world, and it's kind of reshaped society in a way, and it follows a group of traveling performers, and they put on Shakespeare plays, and they travel across the country doing these plays. And the reason that I decided to DNF this book is because where the plot was when I decided to stop reading was our caravan had encountered a guy that basically ran a cult. I thought that this book was going to be about people and their experiences living in a post-apocalyptic world, not about a crazy guy who is trying to brainwash people with a cult. I really don't know if the story continued in that direction. I think that it does based on reviews that I've read, but it just completely disinterested in me, the way that the main character, the cult leader, was like twisting the word of God, and it was just not well done in my opinion, and I really didn't like it. So I just decided to put that book down, and I'm really hesitant now to pick up any more of her work, even though I do want to try reading some of her other titles. The next book I DNF'd was Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. This is an adult romance written by Christina Lauren, which is an author duo. And as you know, I'm not a big romance reader. And I picked this book up because it was just being ranted and raved about on BookTube. And I, no joke, read 90% of this book before I DNF'd it. First off, I could not stand Hazel. I don't know anyone in their right mind who actually acts like that. And if they did, I personally would have to separate myself from that person because it's not something that I could put up with. It's just, it's not quirky. It's way past quirky. And just some of the things that came out of her mouth were just so inappropriate, and she would do it in like a professional setting where it's like, no, she's supposed to be an elementary school teacher in this story, and like she would just spew out these inappropriate things in front of like work people, and I'm like, if I did that at my job, I'm pretty sure HR would be called on me. And I just was not invested in the romance, and the way that the story ended had to do with a trope that a lot of people don't like, including myself, and I just didn't even care about the relationship to care that that trope was introduced, and that's how the story ended. So I decided to DNF it, and I actually unhauled that book like the next day because I just didn't like it. And I'll probably never read anything by that author duo again, but you also got to remember that romance is not my favorite genre either. The next popular book I DNF'd was Stalking Drac the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. I read about 100 pages of this book before deciding that it wasn't for me. So if you don't know what this is about a girl named Audrey Rose, and she lives in the time of Jack the Ripper. And as you know, women were not really encouraged to be part of the medicine community during that time. But Audrey Rose is just obsessed with like medicine and cadavers and stuff like that. And her uncle, who's a mortician, I believe, kind of takes her under his wing to teach her how to be a mortician. And I really like that aspect of, you know, women educating themselves, especially during that time period when it was frowned upon, with regards to medicine at least. But I just did not like reading from Audrey Rose's perspective. I just found her train of thought to be like just overly woman power, which sounds really bad, but I feel like you can portray strong women and, you know, woman power in subtle ways, so it's not reading like it's being shoved down my throat every single page. You know, I love feminist themes. I just feel like there's a very tactful way to do it, and it was not tactfully done in this story. I literally felt like I was being yelled at, like, you know, oh, this is a feminist book. That's the way I personally felt, and it just wasn't for me. And I also found the writing style to be a bit amateurist. I think that was her first ever book, so hopefully her writing style has improved the more that she's written. I just have no desire to continue the series or pick up any more of her books. The next book I DNF'd was The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. First off, this book is a magical realism book, and I have never had much success with magical realism, which is kind of ironic to me because I love fantasy and things that can't be explained and magic and that kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever finished a magical realism book. But this book I picked up because I just heard it was absolutely beautiful. It was very emotional and heart-wrenching, and it makes you cry, and I just wanted to like feel all the emotions. But it follows a girl who ends up losing her mother, and after her mother's death, this red bird keeps reappearing, and she's convinced that the red bird is her mother kind of reincarnated or come back to see her. And I didn't finish the book, so I don't really know if that was true or if it was the main character kind of creating in her head a justification for her mother's death. That seems like the more logical explanation, that it wasn't actually a bird. It was just the main character trying to deal with the grief of her mother's death. But I just didn't see it. I didn't get the whole bird thing. One of the things I didn't like about this book is the fact that our main character was constantly describing things in colors. It's like she saw stuff in certain colors and would just go on a tirade about how she viewed these things in these colors. So I just really could not get invested in the story, and it's not one that I plan on trying to read again. The next book is a fantasy book that I have DNF'd twice, and that is Magician Apprentice by Raymond E. This is like a staple, very famous fantasy series with the typical tropes of like a young boy who has a lowly background, who ends up being tutored by a magician and kind of coming into influence and power. So it's got all of the tropes that I really enjoy in classic fantasy. And I tried reading it once and I was bored to tears. And then I tried several years later and was bored to tears. I could not really get invested in the writing style. I just found it really dry and unengaging. So I decided to unhaul it and just realized that maybe this author isn't for me, which makes me sad because he's such a famous fantasy author. And then the next book I DNF'd was pretty much the same exact thing, and that is Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. This is book 1 of the Malazan series, which is like this huge epic fantasy series. I tried reading this book once and I was so flipping confused about what was going on that I put it down, and then I tried picking it up years later to see if maybe I just grew as a reader and might enjoy it more, and I think I read about halfway and I was so confused. I felt like characters were thrown in there without preamble. We found ourselves in all of these different places without explaining what these places were or why they were important, and then people were leaving and dying, and I was like, I don't feel anything because I don't know who these characters are or why they're important. And I've heard that that series doesn't start off on the best foot and that it does get better as the series progresses. But the fact that I've tried to read it twice and DNF'd it twice really makes me not want to try to pick up the rest of the series, which makes me really sad. And the last book I'm going to be talking about is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in her Court of Thorns and Roses series. I actually DNF'd this. I think I was about like at least 75% of the way through, and I actually liked The Court of Thorns and Roses. I liked Feyre, I liked Tamlin, I liked their interaction, and I just felt like when we got to book 2, we were reading a completely different book, a completely different series, completely different characters, and that is one of my main problems with Sarah J. Maas is I feel like as her series progress, it kind of loses its identity from the original story. I just did not like Rysand as a character. I did not like how he treated Feyre in book 1, what he forced her to do. It didn't sit well with me, and unfortunately, it's a series that I have no interest in reading, even though I, like I said, do like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and it is, in my opinion, a great book that can be read as a standalone. I just could not get into the whole relationship between Feyre and Rysand in book 2, and just how things went down with Tamlin and the introduction to all of the characters. I just didn't feel connected to it, and it's just not a series for me. Okay, so those are 10 popular books that I have DNF'd, and most of them I feel like I gave a good time and effort and page count before deciding to put them down. Like I said, if you loved these books, I am so happy for you because books are subjective, literature is subjective, and all of us get certain things out of different literature based on our own experiences and who we are as people. So I am so glad if you loved these books and some of them are your favorites. In fact, let me know in the comments which one of these books I DNF'd are your favorites or if you like them, because I would love to chat with you. And also let me know some books that you didn't like or DNF'd, because those might be some of my favorites. I will see you guys soon in another video. Goodbye. I thought that this book was going to be about people's experiences living and surviving in a post-apocalyptic